بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على النبي الكريم وبعد. Honorable brothers and elders and sisters, we all heard the story of our Prophet ﷺ when in the 10th year of Nubuwwah, after the demise of his wife Khadija and his uncle Abu Talib, on the 10th year of Nubuwwah, the Prophet ﷺ, he had to migrate to Ta'if. The hijrah to Ta'if was actually for da'wah. It was for da'wah, and it wasn't clearly known whether the Prophet of Allah was planning to stay there for long. But the idea was to stay there as long as is needed to invite people towards the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we know the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he traveled and he didn't have anyone with him except for Zayd ibn Haritha radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Zayd was with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet of Allah traveled for approximately 90 kilometers to Ta'if. 90 kilometers to Ta'if. When the Prophet of Allah, he went there, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the journey wasn't as it was expected. Meaning, the people of Ta'if, they didn't respond, they didn't listen. They actually refused to listen to him. And those who did listen to him, they went against him, they threw pebbles at him and they stoned the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they threw so many stones, they asked all the young children to throw stones at the Prophet ﷺ. It was landing on his head, everywhere in his body, that the blood was coming from every part of his body. Until that he went to the shoes, which was clogged, and the Prophet of Allah fell down unconscious. And the Prophet ﷺ, then he sat down and he was removing and wiping the blood from his face. There was another hadith, once the Prophet ﷺ, whilst he was addressing the companions, the Sahabi, they said, the Prophet of Allah, yahki nabiyyan min al-anbiya. Once the Prophet of Allah was telling us a story of a prophet. ضربه قومه. And he said, there is a prophet of Allah, his own people hit him. ضربه قومه فأدموه. And they hit him so much that they made him bleed. وهو يمسح الدم. But the Prophet, he didn't curse them. He removed the blood from his face. And he said, Allahumma aghfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Oh Allah, forgive my people because they do not know. The narrator of the hadith, they say, the Prophet of Allah was actually talking about himself. But he didn't want to mention his name. He said, there is a Prophet of Allah. So from this you could understand, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is actually talking about this incident, Ta'if. This is in one interpretation, Ta'if. So you could from this understand what happened to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he sat down. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made the dua. اللهم إليك أشكو بثي وقلة حيلتي اللهم إليك أشكو قلة حيلتي وهواني على الناس يا أرحم الراحمين إلى من تكلني. And we know the rest of the dua. The point here is this, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam da'wah, is this a failed da'wah? Na'udhu billahi min dhalik. Is this a da'wah that went wrong? And what lesson do we learn from this da'wah? The first two things that we need to understand is, number one, that always remember, anything that we do for the sake of Allah is never a failed da'wah. Sometimes parents, they really lose hope that I'm inviting my children are not listening to me. So we think that we don't give up. There is no da'wah that is called failed da'wah. If you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not going to get instantly someone respond to you. That's not going to happen. It never happened to the Prophet ﷺ. He went to Ta'if and no one listened to the Prophet ﷺ. And he is the Khairul Bashar, the best human to walk on this earth. And he is the Sayyidul Mursaleen, the best of all the prophets ﷺ. So we cannot give up when it comes to giving da'wah. Some people, they give da'wah to their, to the neighbors, da'wah to their, siblings, da'wah to their, family members. And parents, they give da'wah to the children, and they said that they are not listening. They are not listening. It doesn't mean that we give up. Our job is to give da'wah. Our job is to give the da'wah. Hidayah is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not in our hand. You are not responsible who is guided, who is not guided. That's in the hand of Allah. We will be questioned, what did we do when it comes to giving da'wah? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave da'wah because that's the command that he was given. He done that. Number two, what about the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, he was tortured. The Prophet ﷺ was persecuted. The Prophet ﷺ, they threw pebbles at him and stones at him. Where was the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How come Jibril never came down and Mikael didn't come down and all of that, Well, first of all, there was the help of Allah. The help of Allah is always there with the Da'i. We should always remember the help of Allah is always there with the Da'i. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he was sent an angel, and the angel said, O Prophet of Allah, I have been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if you want, I could bring the two mountains together and destroy all the enemies. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, no, I don't want that. I do not want that, because arju an yukhrij Allahu min hadhihi. I hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah azza wa jal will take out from this group of people man ya'budu Allah wahdah la yushriku bihi shay'a, that someone who will worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and he would not ascribe any partner with Allah azza wa jal. That's what I hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet of Allah, he always had this hope that someone will come out. Someone will say, La ilaha illallah. It's a lesson to all of us that whenever you give da'wah, whenever you speak to anyone, just always remember, hidayah is in the hand of Allah. Arju is a very important word the Prophet of Allah used. I hope, I anticipate, I expect. This is what we have to understand. Always have good hope with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, Arju, I hope. Bal arju, I hope. Raja is very important when it comes to da'wah. Raja means I hope. Always have good expectation. A lot of people, they give up very quickly. They're like, the Prophet of Allah, he traveled 90 kilometers, right? No Buraq came and took him this time. He had to travel, because any efforts that we do, any walking that we do, we are rewarded. Any money that we spend, we are rewarded. Anything that happened to us, we are rewarded. And we should always have arju, raja, hope with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And last point is very important. Did the Prophet of Allah complain? The fact that what's happening to him, blood is coming from all over his body, he's unconscious, and then when he regained his consciousness, did the Prophet of Allah complain? He never complained. He complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yes. He said, Allahumma ilayka ashku qillata hilati. Oh Allah, only to you I complain my lack of plans. I don't think I planned it better. See, he never blamed it on Allah. He blamed it on himself. He said, I don't think my planning was good. The route that I took, the timing that I chose, and the way I gave the da'wah, I made mistakes here. Allah, teach me better way to give da'wah. Allahu Akbar. No one can give better da'wah than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the Prophet of Allah is teaching us something very important. That when something goes wrong, don't say the da'wah is wrong. Don't say Allah, the Quran is wrong, or the hadith is wrong, or the work of da'wah is wrong. Your methodology is wrong. Mistake is always point towards yourself. He said, Allah, only to you I complain my lack of plans. Allah, I made the mistakes here. Tell me, teach me, educate me, so that I could do it better as well. So the question again comes, but hang on, I thought we're not allowed to complain. Is the Prophet of Allah complaining about the fact that he was beaten? No. Thrones were thrown at him? Stones were thrown at him? No. His complaint was to Allah something different. Allah, I think I don't know how to plan. Teach me. Oh Allah, maybe you are angry at me. If I could find out that you are not angry at me, then I do not care whatever is happening to me. Meaning, I am ready for more and more and more sacrifices to get the pleasure of you. But I need to know one thing: are you angry at me, Allah? I never want your wrath and anger. So the lesson that we learn here is that we are allowed to complain, but not to human being. Not to the creation, but to the Creator. The complaint to the Creator is ibadah. The complaint to the Creator. When you raise your hand and you ask Allah, oh Allah, I can't eat. Oh Allah, my stomach is hurting. Oh Allah, my ears are hurting. Oh Allah, I have no money in my bank. Oh Allah, I've got nothing. This kind of complaint to Allah is not complaint. It's ibadah. It's worship. This is what Allah wants. You demonstrate your ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, the Prophet of Allah teaching us, learn how to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet of sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he asked Allah, that Allah, are you angry at me? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, immediately after this incident, Allah azza wa jal, two things happened. Number one, Allah called all the group of jinn to speak to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically telling the Prophet of Allah that if the human being, they don't help you, I have other creation as well. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, second thing that happened, Allah invited him for Isra and Mi'raj, when Allah took him to the heavens and showed him other beautiful creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a very important lesson for the du'at, those who are doing the work of da'wah. And most importantly, it's a lesson for the parents, the fathers and the mothers who are listening. A lot of the time that I get messages saying that, what's the effective way of bringing all the children to pray salah? My children are not praying salah, they are not praying, and etc. And the answer is that you continue, you don't stop. Every single day there should be a reminder with, inshallah ta'ala, with love, with affection, with care. And we follow the Prophet's methodology in da'wah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He struggled and he struggled and he struggled. In the daytime, he was doing the work of da'wah, and in the nighttime, he was doing the work of du'a. The connection with the creation is in the daytime, and with the Creator in the nighttime, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us better understanding, teach us better methodology, better way of giving da'wah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله.